All right, I am Ian Zink, Senior Developer Advocate. I've spent a long time out with customers helping them implement software. One of the things that I've seen super important for success with those customers is to give them a blueprint, and that's the decisions and a model for success. Right, this is what that can look like. So let's go into a little bit of what I've made. And definitely not just me, but the whole company's really put a lot of effort into defining a lot of these decisions and best practices that go into the architecture. That's part of this. So this is partially a reference architecture. So you'll see architecture designs as we go into this. It's partly an implementation design. Some things aren't strictly architecture. They're more about the design of your packaging or software. So you'll see that as we go through this. And it's also the decisions you should make or at least be thinking about. So we're going to give you an opportunity as we go through this whole thing to decide if one of these decisions we've made from an architecture or design standpoint, aligns with you. So we're going to tell you this is what the decision we made in our model, and this is why we think you should make it. So you can decide whether or not that decision applies to you or not. And overall, a path for success. So if you do these things, we can have a pretty high confidence that you're going to be successful delivering software to your customers. So where to find it? Go to replicated.com, resources, architecture overview, and you can go check it out right there. So going to give you a real quick high-level overview of the model before we go deeper into each one. At the top of the model, we have a high-level architecture where we literally talk about the pieces of Replicated and the pieces that exist on your vendor side and on the customer side, and just some high-level expectation setting of what we're going to talk about as we go through this. We'll go into more detail on that a little later. We talk about your application, how we think it should be architected for success, what kind of CI/CD things you should be looking at for success when your application is built, what kind of packaging decisions you should be looking like to put your application in for that delivery. When you have determined that your application and package are in a state that you want to release that to your customers, what are the decisions and architecture that apply there? And then when a customer actually is going to take delivery for the first time of your software, what are some of the decisions you need to think about from that standpoint? We also have decisions around support and how that should architect into your own support organization. Documentation, how should you integrate replicated docs, because this is going to be a key part of your application's operation. So you need to include them so your customer knows how to operate those features as well. And finally, sales, which is an interesting one, I think, to put in here, but it's very important because when you think about selling today, there's many decision makers, and one of those decision makers is going to be someone who cares about IT operations. So let's just dive into the model, or first of all, what the model is not as well. It's not the only supported path. Doing reference architecture, I've heard a lot of times, people come to me and they say, hey, Ian, can I do this thing? It's not on in the model, or it's not part of their architecture. And the answer is almost always yes, right? If it's a supported product feature, you can do those things. Just understand why the model did what it did. And if that part doesn't apply to you, that's fine. It's only meant to help you be successful, not to limit your available options. They are not things you must stop and do right now. Maybe some of these things you'll find that you should stop and do right now. You'll be like, I didn't think about that, and I should put that right at the top of my backlog. But likely you'll find a number of things that, hey, we should be thinking about that, or when we see a customer that meets this criteria, we're going to stop and think about that. At least you'll know that this is a decision that you can make, and there's a path that you can follow. The other thing, it's a static document that will never change. This is a living, breathing document as we continue to learn new things. And I hope that you today will, as you go through this, be thinking about these decisions and these architectures, and you'll be providing us input with, if we had thought about these things up front, or if we came to this point and this was an important decision that we had, and we think other customers should think about it too, that you will provide that feedback to us, and this document will change. So this is kind of an overview to frame up what we're going to talk about throughout the rest of the model. And that's just, this is what kind of Replicated's architecture looks like in relation to a vendor and the customers. You have code, you have continuous integration, it's generating releases, or a release. Those releases live in an application, those applications live in a team, they live in the vendor portal, they get promoted to a release channel. Those release channels your customer subscribes to, and you push that code into their either an existing cluster or an embedded cluster that's been defined using our embedded cluster technology curl with an installer spec. And you can see that the licenses are also flowing that way. We have a registry proxy, which handles all your licensing and authentication to your container images. And so that's kind of the very high level overview of the technologies we're going to be talking about as we go through the model. So the first part of the model is application architecture. How should you actually build your application for success in deploying to customer managed environments? Pretty simple. We don't have a whole, we want to leave this pretty unopinionated, but we do have some recommendations, like let people, bring their own remote services if you want. And these are some of those design decisions that you can go through. Like we have, avoid using cloud proprietary services, because that's going to mean that some of your customers, if you rely on AWS, DynamoDB, for example, then someone can't, choose, if they're an Azure customer or running on a data center, they wouldn't be able to use your application. Use horizontally scalable services so that it can scale as high as it needs to. And this might be a spot where you decide, know what, we've built everything on just Postgres, which maybe not horizontally scalable right now, but we think it's working for us, and we're going to worry about that later. So I think that's a good design decision, where you can see that that's a can you could potentially kick down the road if it wasn't a decision you made up front. We recommend using a declarative database schema, because that's going to let you upgrade and downgrade in a sensible way, or let your customers do those things. And then, like app 04, we have wait for resources to become available, and this is more of an optics kind of thing, because Kubernetes will eventually reach a steady state. But if you wait for resources to be available, you don't have customers kind of asking you, why do I see crash loop back off? Why is your app crashing? So if you build in some of that logic, you can just have that slightly better user experience. So we'll talk a little bit about build architecture, and kind of key thing here that we're calling out is, you can see that there's packaging code that you're committing to, and there's application code. Those come together in a continuous integration system, and they generate releases. And those releases live in, will always go towards the unstable branch in your vendor portal. So let's talk about a few of these items. We have integrate your replicated CLI with your CI workflow. So this one I think is a pretty clear win. Just automatically, every time you do a release, you should use the replicated CLI to push your app to replicated. Use the auto flag, because we have a bunch of best practices that we kind of build into that. Sign your commits so that it'll help you to meet SALSA requirements that are coming from verification standpoints, secure supply chain, and similarly sign your images and provide a verification mechanism so that people can verify that that those commits that you made and the dependencies that you're bringing in, that you signed off on them and they haven't been modified somewhere. So we have a packaging architecture, and this is kind of, hey, this is how we think you should package up your apps. You have your manifests, a cluster installer, a pre-flight checks and support collector, your admin console, a set of Helm charts, one of those Helm charts, the admin console connected to it, and your application manifest, living there as well. And these are some of the things we just recommend for your packaging decision, like having a Git branch per channel, release channel. And it's also built into that -- auto flag on the replicated CLI. We recommend having a pre-flight check for any underlying constraints you have on your Kubernetes cluster. So, if you're relying on a storage class or an ingress controller or however many CPUs, definitely create those pre-flight checks so that your customers won't have to deal with a failure. Use Helm charts to create your application manifest is one of the things we kind of recommend just to set you up for future success. So if you do come across an enterprise that only allows Helm, that you're set up there, that they can deploy right in, right? If they're not going to use COTS as an installer mechanism, it just opens up more options for enterprises that might be, adverse to or standardized on Helm. Another option, decision, and this one's probably one of the more controversial ones in here, is not to package an ingress controller. And I could actually see, with the advent of like the gateway API and ingress classes, there could be some change here where we're like, hey, don't package one unless you absolutely have to. But if you are going to package one because you're relying on specific technologies that you need for your application that live in that ingress controller, then ship it as a class, some things like that. So you might look for some more nuance. They'll maybe come out of that. And I think a great spot from feedback for you, if you out there listening and think this is what we found with ingress, I'd love to hear it. Release architecture. So this is the process of actually promoting your releases to go to customers. And this is just kind of shows what that looks like. You're going to, commit SemVer updates into your packaging code. Your continuous integration should be wired up to promote those releases within the vendor portal, and they'll go to the various channels that you've determined. And this just kind of reiterates that. So use SemVer, match your channel names and repository branch names so that you don't end up confused later. It's an easy thing to do in the moment to make them not match, and it's better just to let them match. And just be consistent across versioning in your channels too, so that you don't, if you move someone between channels, all of a sudden their versioning scheme doesn't change. And customer delivery. This is about just setting up your customers for success in delivering the software there. So you can see COTS is going to check for updates, and those are going to flow back to your customers. So let's look at some design decisions that go into customer delivery. So one of the biggest things, or I guess one of the first things that you're going to have to guide customers about is, should they use curl or should they use an existing cluster? And our advice there is, meet them where they are. So if they're comfortable with Kubernetes and they're already managing it, then just go with the existing cluster, use their existing knowledge teams. You'll end up in the right spot there. They'll know how to support it. It'll integrate with their existing stacks, and that'll set them up for success. But if they say, hey, we're not ready to invest in that kind of cloud native architecture yet, we're really more comfortable with VMs, then go ahead and go with a embedded cluster and meet them wherever they are. The other kind of thing about customer delivery is not to forget about integrating with their observability and logging platforms, whatever it is that enterprise is using, to make sure to ask that and to make sure that you're forwarding your metrics and logs to that system so that they're aware if things with the application occur. Support architecture. This is one of my favorites to think about, because I think we make this experience really great and can really save a lot of time here. And that's this one's a little bit more of a process flow in a ways. It's an architecture combined with a process flow. But you have an end user that they open an issue. Hopefully, you've created a support analyzer for it already, and the IT operations team will look at the support analyzer and see it and just automatically resolve the issue. If you didn't, then they're going to open a support ticket with you and say, hey, I'm seeing this problem. You'll be able to review the support bundle using tools like SB Cuddle that we've provided. So the customer is providing a support bundle. You can analyze it using these tools that we've provided to pull apart the support bundle and interact with it. You can follow your kind of standard support procedures, but without actually asking the customer for more things, because the support bundle should have everything you need. And you can determine that could just resolve your issue. If it doesn't, if you say, hey, there's a platform issue, something here, with curl or something Replicate is provided, Replicated can provide support to resolve the issue. In any case, every time an issue is resolved, you should update your manifest with a new support analyzer so that in the future, when that issue occurs, they'll immediately be able to see why and fix it themselves. So yeah, we definitely recommend integrate support bundles with your incident process. Always ask your customers for support bundles. It will help you dramatically. And like I said, like tools like the SB Cuddle really help to speed that through. After each incident, write an analyzer. So whenever you run into an incident, write a new analyzer. You will thank yourself later. At your initial deployment, add support analyzers for known log files and issues. So go through, when you first write your first package, go through your knowledge base, write as many analyzers as you can, and create status informers for all your long running processes, which will on the COTS dashboard, show things are green and be able to tell people whether or not the core functionality of the long running processes are up and running. Documentation architecture. This one's a pretty cool thing as well, because it means you get to write less docs as a vendor, which is really great. This is one of the things, as an engineering background, always, it would excite me about pooling and Replicated is I get to write less docs, right? Because Paige and John Quill, have written them for you. So you can take the enterprise docs that we've written around install and manage and troubleshoot, and take them and import them into your own sections of your own docs. And we even have templates. So we say, hey, use the vendor templates, watch the COTS repository so that when docs changes have been made and you can update your own docs. And just do integrate the docs is just a big call out, because it'll help your customers find the information they need. And finally, a sales architecture. So this just says, hey, in a modern selling world, one of the decision makers is going to be most likely IT operations. They're going to have a section of asking about the capabilities of your software. Can it run on-prem? Can it run air-gapped? Can we scale it? Is it self-healing? Can I integrate it with my log platforms? All of these things are things that Replicated's platform can help you answer. So take our features and integrate them with your sales collateral so that you can say, when you're interacting with that persona that cares about these things, that you can say, this is what we do, and you can get that decision maker on board. Yep. So kind of what I talked about, and also another thing for selling is just integrating it with your license management with your Salesforce, so that you can have like a single source of truth. Okay, I did have one more thing to show you that I added in at the last second. So I'll show you something really cool that I've been talking about doing for a while. And before this session, I decided to go ahead and make it. First of all, I'll show you how to get there. So again, you can go resources, architecture overview, a model for adopting replicated, and you can go through this yourself. And I added a worksheet. So go to the worksheet. It's here. I've taken each one of the decisions, put them in a spreadsheet, and you can say whether you implemented it or not. And if you didn't, kind of justify why. So you can say, maybe I did avoid using cloud proprietary services. So the answer might be implemented yes, but maybe I decided not to use horizontally scalable services. I just say no, I didn't choose to do this because my app, is rely on it, and I don't foresee it being a scaling issue. That we think that's going to be fine for our particular implementation.